Hello, hello. Give me a minute here. So that I can hear. I think we're good. All right. It is June 24th, and today, what I want to do today is I'm actually going to give you guys a special kind of like preview. I'm actually preparing for one of two presentations I'm doing for a local community college here, and I wanted to go through that my first presentation, which is change starts from within. How do you cultivate sort of a change ready mindset? And so I'm going to run through that entire presentation for you all here in the mastermind. So let's go ahead. I'm going to share my screen and kind of go from there. All right, so I've led teams, and for some of you here, you know that I've led teams and built businesses across a wide variety of spaces. So in behavioral health, hospice, different corporate settings, even led a team in our local poker room. And every single one of these environments, one single truth keeps showing up. And that is if you don't change how you think, you won't change how you lead. So today we're not going to be talking about just theory. We're going to be talking about practical ways that you can shift your mindset and how you can help the people that you potentially lead do the same. So I want to share a moment that completely for me changed the way that I lead. So a few years ago, well, actually, I guess now that I'm getting older, a little longer than I guess a few years ago, I was responsible for rolling out a major system implementation within our department. But it was a system implementation that not only touched our department, but it touched pretty much every workflow, every role, and every reporting line, as well as had other stakeholders within the organization as well. So on paper, it was exactly what the organization needed. However, in practice, it felt like chaos, right? The team, they were overwhelmed, they were frustrated, and they were resistant. And the truth is, I guess, so was I. You see, inside, I kept asking myself the question, like, why isn't anybody seeing the big picture? Why aren't they getting on board? What is going on? Then it hit me that I was the one causing the resisting the most. And it wasn't because I doubted the goal. It wasn't that I didn't see where it needed to be done, but it was because my own mindset hadn't shifted to lead through the change. You see, I took a step back and I applied the new internal framework and approach that we're going to explore today. And I stopped trying to sell, right, the entire mountain range ahead as the change and started breaking it down. And I started breaking it down by asking questions like, what are we feeling right now? What are we facing right now? What part can we own today? What single move can help us take a step forward? And with that, the shift began to become immediate. The team wasn't just complying, they started leading even small portions of the change themselves. Why? Because big change can seem and it always feels insurmountable until you have the ability to change the way that you think and the way that you see that change. And that's what today's about, changing the way that we think so that we can guide ourselves and eventually our teams through any transformation with confidence. So, why does this matter? You see, most change efforts don't fall apart because the strategy was flawed. They fail because the people involved, including us as leaders, haven't shifted their mindset. According to McKinsey and Company, they found that 70% of large-scale change efforts fail. And often it's not due to bad plans, it's due to resistance, fear, or lack of internal alignment. So if your mindset isn't aligned with the direction of the change and the direction of the organization, your behavior will subconsciously begin to sabotage it. That's why personal leadership is the foundation of organizational transformation. So I want to kick off with a poll question here. And I want you, as you're thinking of this question, I don't want you to like deep dive into it. What is the first of the four choices that comes to mind when I ask you the question, how do you usually feel about change? Is it excited, cautious, overwhelmed, or does it truly depend on the situation? Again, don't think too far into it. I want you to pick the first one that comes to mind. And whatever your answer is, again, there's no right or wrong answer. The reaction, that first sort of thought, it's telling because it's a reflection of your default mindset towards uncertainty. And don't judge yourself because of it. So if you said cautious, don't judge yourself for being cautious. Just become aware of it because that's step one. And what really gets in the way is that most of us think resistance, we think of resistance as a flaw. However, in reality, resistance to things is more of a protection type mechanism. The the amygdala, which is our brain's alarm system, this activates when we're facing these things and these changes of uncertainty, and it truly triggers our stress responses, which is one of three things. It's either fight, flight, or freeze. And we resist because of internal fears, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of embarrassment or of incompetence. And your team is going to resist you for those same reasons. And by you having the awareness as a leader, you can then begin to recognize these fears within your team, which will give you a leadership advantage. You yourself can begin to mix empathy with your strategy. So one of the first ways that I like to mix empathy, right, with strategy with my teams is one of the first things that I do in conversations that I have with either a new team when I'm coming into a new organization or if we have new employees is I sit them down and I explain the following. I know that we all have lives outside of the office, right? So I don't expect you to, when you walk in the door, to drop everything that's personal. I don't expect you to switch into, let's say, robot mode. I actually expect you to understand what you're carrying and to just make me aware of it. Let me know that you're something's facing and something's happening so that I have an understanding of what is going on with you. And at this moment, right, heads begin to nod in agreement. Their shoulders begin to relax. Because what happens in that moment is that your team, whether it's in a group setting or individual, they begin to realize that you see them as people first and then professional second. They feel like you actually see them, right, as an individual. And another way that I also focus on empathy is that recognizing when people are facing those kind of breaking points or those stressors within the day-to-day workflow. And what we ended up doing to give people more breathing room was we started having monthly kind of lunches. And in these lunches, the team picked the restaurant, right? But there was one rule. And that one rule was that while we were at lunch, we are not allowed to talk about projects, changes, or work. So for an hour, we sat there and we swapped family stories. We laughed about jokes or things that were going on, right? We talked about our favorite TV shows. And when we came back to the office, everybody came back a little lighter, a little more connected. And most importantly, they were more willing to tackle any change that we were facing together. So the lesson here is that sometimes the biggest barrier to change isn't a new system. It's the silent stress that people are already carrying before that change is even given to them. And when you, as a leader, can acknowledge their humanity first, what happens is that their resistance begins to melt away and real progress can truly begin. And some of you may know of mindset traps, and here's a few of them. right? A couple of them, fear of failure. We've always done it this way. Oh my God, that one's like nails on a chalkboard. When I hear we've always done it this way, it's like something inside of me just, like, ugh. Okay. So I hate that saying, and but it's so common. So many people resist change by saying that. Um, and for that, it could just be a fear of failure, right? It could also be self-doubt when they say that sort of that sabotaging, right? That trap. Or another few could be like, I'm too old to pivot, or I'm retiring soon. Why do I want to make a change now? Right? That could be self-doubt or even fixed thinking when you have an employee or even yourself saying that. Another one, which more like in the self-doubt frame, would be something like, if can't do it perfectly, why would I try at all? Or if I change, somebody will see me as weak or unsure. And so each one of these different excuses that people fall into in terms of a mindset trap, these are what we call fixed mindset scripts. But the good news about scripts is that scripts can be rewritten. Just like our favorite TV shows or our favorite movies, that script probably went through a rewrite process 100 times before they finally got it right. And that's the same thing with our mind. You don't have to be stuck with a fixed mindset type script. So before we talk about one of my most impactful mindset shifts that I made, I want to ask you this question. So which of these statements most reflects your belief around your own personal ability? Is it you either have certain abilities or you don't? You can improve with effort and practice over time. It truly depends on the skill or the situation that you're facing. Or are you truly not sure? And again, it's not a quiz. This is really just a reflection of your current mindset, your current default with how you naturally approach learning, growth, and of course, change. So write it down or put it in the comments. Which one of these best reflects your belief about personal ability? And so this leads me to introduce Dr. Carol Dweck. And some of you may have already heard of this book, but her book, Mindset, has been one of the biggest influences and learning opportunities in my career. So in her book, Mindset, she outlines the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset. And for me, it was fundamental in how I led and how I was able to recover from mistakes and setbacks. Because for myself, I was stuck in that fixed mindset, which you're going to hear about. And over time, I was able to, through repetition and through um, consistency, I was able to kind of shift the way that I thought of myself. So to start, fixed mindset. If you're in the fixed mindset, you believe that your abilities are set in stone, right? If you're struggling, it's because you're just not good enough. And a great example of somebody in the fixed mindset, they believe that your max potential or your path in life is basically given to you at birth, and you are going to have no power to affect the outcome. So if when you're growing up, people who are in the fixed mindset, maybe they wanted to be a professional baseball player, but the first time that they got rejected, they said, "Oh, I guess I'm not good enough to be a baseball player. I'm going to have to change and be something else." That's somebody who lives in the fixed mindset. Now, somebody in the growth mindset, they believe that struggling is just part of learning. You can get better with effort and strategy and support. When you practice the growth mindset, your default becomes to look for and see the opportunities, to find the lessons in each setback. When you're practicing the growth mindset, you will always see yourself as growing and learning. So when leaders like you and I, when we can embrace the growth mindset, we begin to model resilience. Your team always takes their emotional cues from you. So if your approach to change is negative or frustration, your team is probably going to react the same way. However, if you can approach change with openness and curiosity, so will they. So if growth mindset is the game changer towards change or the game changer in our life, and the fixed mindset is kind of that anchor that's holding us back, here's the obvious next question is how do we move ourselves and in turn our teams from a fixed to a growth mindset in real time when the pressure's on because we're facing changes or we're going through day-to-day activities. You see, it's one thing to agree that growth mindset is better, but it's another where you can begin to actually catch yourself mid-reaction, flip that invisible mental switch, and actually lead forward with your team. You see, I used to be, and I used to think that your mindset was purely motivation, something you either felt or you didn't, right? There was no changing it. It was something, it's in your head. I was completely in the fixed mindset, and I would be there for days until I realized that mindset can be coached, practiced, and even systematized, just like any other skill. And so that's where the RAD shift framework comes into play. Think of it as the bridge between knowing about growth mindset and actually implementing it and living it. So the first step is to recognize that the reaction that you are having in the moment towards any change or situation. The second step is to align your thinking with purpose and opportunity for that decision. And then the third step is to just take one small action that is just that logical next step. So let's break it down because once you master each one of these three steps, you can then begin to coach your team to do the same, even in the middle of a change. So, step one is recognize. Awareness is the first step to authority. This is about noticing resistance the moment that it shows up before it becomes self sabotage, right? When something changes, your first reaction is often a mix of emotion and internal dialogue. And if you're like me, a lot of times that emotion is frustration, is maybe resentment towards a change. And the internal dialogue is like, you're never going to be able to accomplish this. Why are you taking this on? Right? And think if you're having these reactions, your team probably is too. And when you're not careful and you're not recognizing that you're having these internal negative mix of emotions and dialogue, that inner voice that you're hearing, it begins to run the show. So in the first step, this is going to be the hardest one to start. And the reason why I say that is because if you're not used to catching yourself, you're not used to recognizing when you're having these reactions or these thoughts and emotions, it's going to take a lot of time for you to be able to do this in a more timely fashion. So, for example, myself, I used to take sometimes, as I said, days. Then days turned into hours. Hours then turned into minutes, right? And so as you continue to do it, the time for you to actually begin to recognize and make the shift, it's going to happen quicker. You just have to remember to continue to do it through consistency and habit forming. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So in the recognizing stage, what you want to ask yourself is you want to ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this situation that's not true? So if you're telling yourself something like, I'm not good enough or I'll never make it work, that's a story. That's not something that's true. You can make it work and you will make it work. So get rid of that story. Or what emotion is showing up and what's causing it, right? So if you say you're frustrated and that's an emotion that's coming up, why are you frustrated? Is it because you're trying to focus on the large goal at hand and not take the small steps? Understanding each emotion that comes up and what actually makes what's actually underneath it that's leading to that emotion can help you as a leader begin to actually plan forward and move forward. And as a leader, as you're helping your team become more aware of their story, you can ask questions like, well, what concerns are showing up for you right now? What part of the process is the hardest for you personally? What part of the change is hard for you personally? And sometimes these questions can be asked into groups. Sometimes they can be asked in one-on-one kind of settings. But by asking these questions, you're allowing them to be seen as part of the team, as part of a human. And also, by asking these types of questions, they're able to get into their internal recognition as well as begin to understand themselves what they're going through. And this step, the recognition step, helps to create space between reaction and response. And when people begin to feel seen and heard, they're more willing to then move forward. So by asking them and giving them that space to respond and to actually hear them, they're actually going to, in the end, feel more inclined to move forward with you. So, an interesting fact around the recognition stage is that neuroscience research shows that by just labeling emotions, it can actually reduce the amygdala's activity, which is, as we talked about, the fear center of the brain, and help increase the cognitive control. So, just by labeling that you are feeling some kind of emotion can help you actually overcome that emotion. So, just labeling, I'm frustrated, already starts you on the path to overcoming that frustration. Okay. Step two is to align. So, this is where you're reframing your resistance to reconnect with your values, to your mission, to the ultimate goal at hand of the department or the organization with which you're working. So now, once you've recognized what's showing up, the next step is then to reframe it, to restate it in a positive light that aligns with your values or the goals. So for yourself, you could ask, what could this make possible? So what could this change or what could this opportunity make possible for you or for the department or for the company? Next, you could ask something like, how does this change align with who you want to become as a leader? And is the story that you're telling yourself counterintuitive to where you want to become as a leader? This is where your mindset, it starts to shift. And it's not just to begin to feel better, but you're actually realigning your thoughts with something purposeful in your life, purposeful in your job, purposeful in your team. And as a leader, you can guide your team by asking questions like, what might this challenge help us grow stronger in? Or what does this change help us move closer to in our mission or our goals as a department? How might this align to the ultimate next step that we are planning for? And again, by asking open-ended questions of your team, they begin to persuade themselves by answering that question and giving you that answer. So instead of trying to, as I said earlier, sell, right, the mountain, you're actually helping them talk through each path and of the mountain, right? So you're not telling, you're actually getting them to tell and buy in. And so people, right, why this truly matters is that people don't resist change. They resist change that feels disconnected from the purpose, disconnected from the goals or the mission of the organization. And during this step, you can align everything, which brings everything back into focus, brings everything back into the process, right? So when you align everything with your values and your goals, you can get the buy-in from your team. You see, according to Gallup, they found that teams with strong mission alignment are actually 54% more engaged and 27% more likely to adapt well during change. So if you think of your team, how well do you feel like your goals or your missions are aligned with the things that you're trying to implement within that team? And if they're not aligned, it's probably where you're getting some resistance. Step three is direct, small, intentional action. Helps to create forward energy. And so this final step is truly about motion, but not random motion. It's about taking one small, aligned action that reinforces the mindset shift that you want to make, that helps you move that change forward. One small thing today. And so what I want you to think of, and when I was putting together this section, I thought of a meme, or not a meme, but it was an image. And I created a video of it a while back, and I couldn't find the image. But what I want you to do in your head right now is I want you to imagine two ladders. Okay? The ladder on the left is full of a bunch of tiny spaced out rungs. And let's say it reaches 100 feet high. The ladder on the right, same ladder, same height, still goes to 100 feet. But instead of maybe a rung every foot, it's a rung every 7 feet. Right? So you can see that in your head, right? You see one left, bunch of, one every foot up to 100 feet, and the other one's like every 7 to 10 feet. What happens is if I asked you, like, which one's going to help you get to the top the quickest, a lot of you, hopefully, are going to say the left, right? The one that has one rung every foot. It's going to help you get to the top. But what happens in reality is that so many people want the giant leaps forward. They want the ladder on the right, never realizing that if they just took the ladder on the left and they 3, 4, 5 months down the road, they turned around, they realized they took all these small steps, that they actually took way more than one giant leap. So what you can do in this stage is I want you to ask yourself questions like this. What's one step that I can take right now that reflects the kind of leader I want to be? Or what's one step that I can take right now that's going to help the team move further down the path? What's one simple thing that I can control right now in this moment? Is another good question. What can you control? Stop trying to control the uncontrollable. And with your team in stage three, when you talk about the direct small action steps, with your team, ask what's a step that we can take this week that's going to move us forward? Even if it's just a little bit, what's one step that we can take that's going to move us forward? The second would be like, what does progress look like between now and, let's say, Friday? Or what does progress look like between now and our next meeting, let's say next Monday? By asking these questions of your team, they're now getting buy-in because they're answering the question, but they could realize that we're not focused on the long-term solution, which you as a leader are ultimately leading them towards, but they don't have to see the giant mountain range that's in front of them. Right? They can see the small step forward that they just need to take between now and next week. So by taking action, even tiny action, can help build belief in the overall plan and the overall change that's happening. It can help you create identity as well within that change. And when your action matches your intention, that's where you can truly begin to build confidence. See, according to BJ Fogg, he did some research on habit formation and found that micro actions that are taken consistently are more sustainable and more effective than trying to take big leaps done sporadically. So again, focus on the ladder on the left, small incremental changes. Don't try to take the ladder on the right, big leaps, right? You're going to spend too much time trying to get that first step. And that's ultimately where momentum builds. That first step. You can't build momentum without taking that first step. So how do we put it all together? So let's recap. So recognition, excuse me. This is where you stop and you notice that mental or emotional resistance that you're feeling towards a change or towards an internal process and your own thought process, as well as then help your team begin to notice that as well. Step two is your alignment. So this is where you're reframing with intention and linking it back to the purpose or the ultimate goal of your department or of your team or of your organization. And then step three is now direct. Take one clear action that reinforces the change in your mindset, change in the goal and the objective. And as a leader, right, your goal here is not just to use it. Your goal is to model it and teach it to your team and then to repeat. So you don't need to control the entire path right from this moment today. You just need to lead them to the next step with clarity. And the RAD framework is going to help you do that. This framework gives you that clarity. It helps you give your team something simple and powerful that they can remember so that the next time they have a change knocking on their door, they can quickly begin to apply this framework. So what I want you to do is I want you, if you have a pad of paper or even a notebook or whatever, I want you to, take it. We're going to take a couple minutes here. We're going to apply the RAD framework to your life. So what I want you to do is first think of something that you're facing right now, whether it's internal, a change that you're facing, and what is that story that you're telling yourself about it? What's that belief that you can identify that's holding you back? So write it down. What is that story? And it doesn't have to be in depth right now. This is just a simple kind of overview thought process of the RAD framework. But once you've identified what that belief is that's holding you back, next, what I want you to do is I want you to align and by finding what's that opportunity in your story, right? So, how could you align your actions to your core values by making a change or making a shift from that story that you're telling yourself? So, if you're telling yourself you're not worth it, how can you align that yes, you can by aligning it with your goal? Maybe you have a goal to get a promotion. But if you're recognizing that a belief that you're having is that you're not going to get a promotion, you're not good enough, you have to get rid of that belief. And now you have to realign your thoughts to your actual goal, to your actual core values. And then once you've identified the opportunity, what's one small aligned action that you could take this week to keep you moving forward? What's something that you can turn into a small step that repeated over time will turn into giant leaps? And again, it's not just a mental exercise, it's actually part of a leadership practice, something that you can implement into your daily activities. Maybe it's every morning you self reflect and run through a quick RAD review of your thinking. Maybe it's the end of the day, maybe it's middle of the day, but it's something that you can implement within your leadership practice that helps you become a better leader and be able to lead through change. So that once we understand, right, how to recognize, align, and direct our mindset during moments of change, the next step is how to do it consistency, right? And how to do it consistently. So it's not just about reacting well once, right? Or doing it well the first time and then, oh, well, I got it down pat. No. Because if you're like me, just because you do it once doesn't mean it's going to happen that way the next time. It's about becoming somebody who can lead that way by default because it's built into your memory, right? It's built into your muscle memory. That's where habits come in. So because the more often that you're able to apply this, the more natural it's going to become, the more adaptable you and your team can be. So what I wanted to kind of cover here briefly are 3 daily or weekly habits that you can begin to implement that can help you, right, implement your long-term adaptability. So the first is daily wins, making sure that you're celebrating not only your own small daily wins, but you're also reflecting on one thing that your team handled very well, even if it was small. Sending an appreciation, hey, I appreciate the way you handled that report, or I appreciated the way that you took charge on that project or that piece of the project. It was really helpful. These daily wins add up over time, and it helps you become, right, more of a habit builder because you feel good about the habit you're changing. So give yourself a pat on the back saying, hey, I did great at recognition today. I was able to recognize when I was thinking, right, in a negative, or I was thinking about a belief that wasn't very true. Give yourself that win. The second one is finding spots or ways for you to stretch your comfort zone. So putting yourself in discomfortable situations. So for me, as an example here, was networking, right? One of my biggest things was networking. I'm an introvert. Some people don't believe it, but I'm an introvert. Um, and I guess you can call it an extroverted introvert, right? I like to get my reset from being by myself, or however that works. That's another presentation for some. But for me, right, I had to put myself in uncomfortable spots to stretch my comfort zone. So for me, I actually lead an entire networking group for the platform Alignable. I'm an ambassador for the Cleveland area. And so part of that is putting myself in uncomfortable spots to actually have to go up and introduce myself and talk to people that I may not ever have met before, which is very uncomfortable for me sometimes. So doing this on a regular basis helps you stretch your limits of your comfort zone. And the third one, which I also find very impactful for myself, is journaling. So every morning or every afternoon or evening, whatever is comfortable for you, take 3 to 5 minutes and just get the experiences out of your head, right? The thoughts out of your head and onto paper. This can help you kind of gain insights on what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and it can also help you learn from what you're going through with changes that you're facing. You see, the habits, right? These three can help build cognitive flexibility and psychological resilience, right? Which are two traits that every effective leader needs. So I want you to take a moment and I want you to think, like, which of these three habits are you most likely to implement in the next 7 days? Are you going to be focusing on the daily wins with your team? Are you going to be trying to put yourself in some uncomfortable situations to stretch your comfort zone? Are you going to try journaling? Or are you just unsure? So you don't know yet. And that's okay if you don't know. But whatever you pick, remember, consistency truly does beat intensity. So make sure you're consistent with what you're doing and do it every day, whether it's setting a reminder for yourself in your calendar, on your phone. But consistency truly does beat intensity. So let's think of your action plan, right? So, how are you going to leave here, right, and implement this in your life? So, here's your action plan. Number one, identify the one thing you're facing, right? Whether it's an internal change, an organizational change, and write it down. What I then want you to do is I want you to figure out what is one belief that regarding to that change that you're feeling that you are willing to let go of, right? So what is something that you're feeling about that change that's causing you, and maybe it's being a resistance or it's being a factor of, you know, um, holding you back? What is something that you're willing to let go of, right? And only focus here on the beliefs that are holding you back and get rid of them and be willing to get rid of them. So if you're saying to yourself something like, I'm not good enough, or I don't know how to do this, or I will never be able to get us to the next step, those are beliefs that are not willing to, right? They're not good for you. So get rid of them, right? Throw them away and replace them with the positive affirmation. So if you're telling yourself, I'm not good enough, replace it with, I am good enough. I do know what I'm going to do here. I do know how to lead my team through this. By getting rid of the negative beliefs, the only thing that you can fill it back with is positive beliefs. And then once you've gotten rid of that belief, because now you've aligned it to your goal and your outcome, now is where you can identify that one step that you're going to take this week that is going to reflect you as a leader that you want to be, right? And that can help you with your team. And here's the thing that you can do with your team: take them through this same exercise. Have them identify what they're facing, have them identify a belief that's holding them back, and then have them identify just one simple step that they can take this week that's going to reflect the individual that they want to become, and that's going to help you all make the change that you want to make in your organization, in your department, that's going to help you get towards the goals that you want to reach. See, change starts with awareness, but ultimately, change is solidified through the actions that we take on a regular basis. So, final thoughts. Just like death and taxes, change is inevitable, change is guaranteed. However, growth is not guaranteed. Growth only happens by being intentional with the actions that you take on a regular basis. The leaders who truly thrive in disruption, it's not because they're the smartest leaders, it's not because they're the most adaptable leaders. No, it's because they use a framework like the Rad Shift framework to train your mind to lead through the uncertainty, right? To lead not only internally, right, first, but then take that and apply it to your team. So, with that in mind, I appreciate everybody being here today. Thank you for showing up today, not just for yourself, but for the team that you lead, for those that you lead. Keep growing together. And if you're interested, I have a mindset reset guide. It's a 7-day sort of guide that can help you kind of track the RAD framework thinking for 7 days. So if you're interested in that, go ahead, scan the QR code. It'll open up the texting app on your phone. Simply insert your first name and your email address, and I will make sure by the end of the day that you get access to the guide for yourself, and you can reuse it. You can share it with anybody that you want as well. So with that, I feel like we have a few extra minutes to ask some questions and answers here. So if you guys have any Q&A or any thoughts, and if you're watching the recording of this and something comes up that you want to think through, drop it down below, either in the comments or drop it in the community if you're in the mastermind, because this is my mastermind presentation. But I hope you guys enjoyed kind of this preview of this presentation I'm going to be giving. I hope it was impactful, something that you were able to take away from today. But I appreciate you being here. I hope you guys have a wonderful and amazing rest of your week, and we'll talk to y'all soon.